Welcome, everyone. We are live and we're going to give folks a few minutes to trickle in. We are live on a few platforms now, live on Restream, live on YouTube, and live on LinkedIn. But we'll give folks a few seconds, and then we have some exciting material and some all-star guests here today, and we're going to do a brief round of intros, then dive into some awesome content we have prepared.
We got a couple people waiting. So Arjun, maybe we could give a little bit of context on how we got together. I don't know if I've ever told you how I met Jaime. Jaime is a little bit older than us.
Just by a bit, not that much.
Not that much. He was actually a professor of mine in college, Introduction to Engineering. And he was my favorite teacher, basically because he didn't accept any BS from students. Like when someone got out of line, Jaime was very direct, not in in authoritarian way, more like, okay, if you're so smart, if you're getting out of line, let's see how much you know. And he would just put them in the spot, and it was a very quick, easy, and effective way of getting control of the class. And he was a teacher. And then when I started my podcast in 2019, he was graceful enough to be our second guest when we basically didn't have anything going on with the pod. And that's where I met Jaime.
You guys were one of the first to start doing podcasting in Peru, so you have a heads up, way more journey than everyone else around here. So that's good.
Yeah, I since I started my business, my marketing agency, I basically lived plugged in with podcasts, and basically started thinking with Santiago, my friend, why isn't there a Tim Ferriss style stories interview podcast about the stories of LATAM founders? So we started, and Jaime, who's been what do you call it, Singularity University, and started and sold a startup, and now is basically doing that fun VC route, was a good second guest to the pod.
Love it. No, I mean, I love the origin stories. I think they're always fascinating, especially for entrepreneurs, for any type of business, or even how people connect. And as you can see here, what we're going to cover today is a really awesome session on globalizing your LATAM business, starting with the US. But this applies if there are folks listening who are not based in LATAM, based elsewhere, this still applies. But Jaime and Diego here, really excited to have you two on as well, because I think your experience and companies you've worked with, entrepreneurs you've worked with, your networks, etc. A lot of founders might be in this position where they're based in LATAM or working with LATAM, and have maybe run into issues, problems, or have questions about what they can do. And I'm here based in New York, and as we'll get into, Dula has really carved out a role or a way to help founders take that dream idea and turn it into their dream business in the US. But to start, what I was thinking we could do is we're going to cover a lot today. We have a full hour. We're going to save some time for questions at the end. And for everyone listening, you might have seen this, but we are going to be giving away a free LLC at the end to folks who tune around. So if you haven't already, please make sure you've registered online at the registration page and you've entered your email there. We're going to choose someone from there, and we're going to cover through a lot of content in terms of formation, banking, taxes, and more, especially from LATAM. But to start, what I was thinking, Diego, Jaime, if you could each do a little introduction on yourselves, the business or businesses you're working on or have in the past too, and then anything just from your personal experience as well about globalizing a business or taking a business you've worked on and expanding it to other regions too. I think the personal stories and anecdotes are always valuable to show. These are all questions people have. It doesn't matter how much experience you have or how many businesses you've personally worked on. we've all faced these challenges. That's how Doula began. I'll share that story next. But Diego, if you'd like to start, and then Jaime go up next, would love if y'all could do a brief introduction and then any personal anecdote on this experience that you've personally faced too.
Cool. Since we're doing it not only to people in LATAM, let's switch it up and I'll keep it in English. Um, well, I'm Diego Razetto. I'm 28 years old. Basically, being an entrepreneur, a founder has been everything I've done. I started a marketing agency when I was still in college in 2017. Basically, why did I choose a marketing agency? I wanted something that didn't require capital to start, something I could do in my computer and my cell phone while I was in class from anywhere in the world. I consider myself kind of creative, so I wanted creativity to be a part of the business, and a digital marketing agency basically united my passion for business, technology, and creativity. You could call it my ikigai. And I started the business. It went really well. We've worked with all types of clients, from big banks, from telecommunications companies. We've worked with hotels, food franchises. We've worked with professional services of all kinds, from lawyers to accountants, and we've worked with startups of all kinds. And in 2019, we were commenting a little bit about this before. I had my own personal frustration of there not being any LATAM podcast around business and interviewing people who have had success with entrepreneurship. So I started Era Digital, which means digital era, Era Digital podcast, and it's going pretty well. I love it. Now I'm starting a second company, which I think is even more aligned with my passions, which is escalable.com, which is basically an e-learning and community business for people who are founders or solo founders, independents, basically trying to create what I wish I had when I started my journey when I was that college student, which with a bunch of questions and needing to connect with other people who had already made the mistakes beforehand. When it comes to my relationship with starting a business in the States, I guess I have a lot of connection there with Jaime, because Jaime did it before me. My first need, or the reason I wanted to start a business there, even though I live in LATAM, is because I wanted to sell this membership through Stripe, because the ways you could sell digital products in LATAM are not very good. Stripe has a great product there, but you can't use it if you don't have a company in the States, or at least you can't use it if you have a company in Peru, right? So I got in touch with Jaime, who was already a good friend. He had already set up his company. He made a lot of mistakes. He should have used Doula, and I basically clinged on to his company, and now I want to do my own company, and I'm definitely going to use Doula. So I definitely am very keen on learning what, Arjun, you have set up today, so I don't make any mistakes like Jaime did.
Jaime, are you going to share these mistakes?
I can surely do that. Yes, of course. Well, thanks, Diego, for the words, and thanks, Arjun, for the invitation. So I'm Jaime Sotomayor. I am a system engineer. I've done startups since very young. I've always loved like the intersection between business and technology. I would say that the most successful company I've managed to build was actually in the US. I did several ones in Peru, which didn't amount to much. But the one that I'm very proud of was a biotech company that I did in the US, which we end up raising a series of of investment rounds. And that was my first approach on building a company or incorporating in the US, and it was expensive. You had all these lawyers giving you advice on what legal structure you would need. And, you have to have the Delaware, but then if you're operating in California, you have to register as a foreigner company. So there's all these complexities associated just on incorporating your company. So this is a lot of things that I've learned in the past, and a lot of things that we might even talk today. But it's interesting, it's not that easy. But there's solutions like Dula that would have been awesome to have back then. They would have made it way easier to do. After doing that company, I came back to Peru. I now sat on the other side of the table. Instead of being an entrepreneur, I started helping entrepreneurs. I created accelerator programs. I was the director for Guaira Peru, which is Telefónica's CVC, a corporate venture capital arm. So my role was to invest in startups. And a lot of them actually, even though they would start in Peru, they would eventually expand across LATAM. And the today very standard way of doing that is you incorporate an LLC in Delaware. That's like the basic. And then the Peruvian company or the Mexican company or Argentinian company becomes a subsidiary that is now owned by the LLC, which we call it here, at least in Peru, the flip to Delaware. So, that's one of the reasons why you would end up having an LLC. But we can discuss that further. And then because I still have this entrepreneurship thing, and I was like, I want to start a new business, but I cannot sell to all LATAM from Peru. So why not start another company? But instead of doing an LLC, I went for the C Corp route. I made one big mistake there, and we can go into why it would have been better to do an LLC anyway. But that was one experience, and I ended up closing it. So that's something also interesting. What is it easy to open? Is it easy to close? How is it different from doing it in your country? So there's a lot of interesting lessons and stuff that we can talk about. Now, what roles I am? I'm a director for a innovation association, so I help corporates on their innovation efforts. I also building a venture fund on my own, and what you see in my name, Innovación Sin Barreras, is a podcast I actually started out in 2020, right at the start of the pandemic. It was a coincidence. It was not meant to be because of that, but I always wanted to have a podcast and talk to entrepreneurs, investors, innovation leaders, experts in technology to get all that knowledge and share it to the ecosystem. So that's what I do now. 145 episodes so far. So it's fun. And thanks again for having me here.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. And we're definitely going to have to come back to the lessons you learned from forming the C Corp versus the LLC. I think a lot of people, and we're going to actually jump right into that. How do you know which type of entity to form? How do you know when the right time is to form? What are the benefits of having a U.S. company versus doing it in or forming an entity in your country too? Even just stories of, hey, when you were raising venture capital, were there any things you wish you had done differently? So I think we'll come back to both here. Both of the lessons and learnings from your journey, Jaime, and from your journey, Diego. For folks listening as well, feel free to question in or write in with any questions you do have as we go through. I think Jaime and Diego definitely, we're going to come back to you two, and you two will definitely chime in with questions as well. But what we want to do here is I'm going to go through some prepared material we have on how you can establish a company in the US from LATAM, from anywhere in the world. And I think we'll really try to lean in on the personal stories here and anecdotes as we go through too. But again, as folks are listening, definitely write in questions. And again, if you stick through to the end, we have a little fun giveaway with a company involved. So stick around, ask the questions, and we'll jump right in. Very first thing is Dula wouldn't be possible without some of our backers. And, we have some of the world's best investors on our side, including Y Combinator, Nexus Venture Partners, and some awesome angel investors too. But the truth is, the most important people out there are customers. And it's not just customers, they're entrepreneurs. And when we started the business Doula, this was actually the landscape or the situation that we faced. And for Jaime, for Diego, for other folks here who've tried starting a business before, some of these images might look familiar, especially if you've tried to do things in the US. But the truth is, to set up a business and not just set it up, but keep it compliant and running, there's actually more than 10 things you have to do here. You have to form the company with the state's website. This is the Delaware state logo. You then have to get a thing called a registered agent. You might have no clue what a registered agent is. It's required in all 50 states in the US, LLC or C Corp. You then need your EIN or your tax ID number. You then need to spin up a US business bank account if you'd like to get paid in dollars. And I think I'll say that right now. Did you know you can open a US business bank account from outside the US, from LATAM, without a US social security number? I think that's a major thing people aren't aware of, and that's huge. That can open a lot of doors, and well, here's some of the ways that has for the entrepreneurs here. Payment processor with Stripe, so you can charge via credit or debit and then deposit to your bank account. And then everything to keep the business running. What about a virtual mailbox if you don't have physical property in the US and to separate personal from business? What about paying taxes to the IRS? Do you have to pay taxes? Do you have to pay taxes in America? We'll get into this too, but with an online digital business, you can actually set up a company in the US and only pay taxes in the country where you live. That means there's an informational filing required in the US to the IRS, but you wouldn't pay income tax in the US. You pay income tax in the country where you live. A lot of people don't realize that too. And I think that's one of the major benefits or the positives of getting an LLC set up and doing it in the right way. But there's state compliance. How do you stay compliant with the state of Wyoming or Delaware? What if you have a tax question? Who do you go to? And then do you go to Google for support, or is there a partner who can help there? And this is the landscape that founders in LATAM and all over the world face. And what we thought was, wait a second, what if instead you could click a button and build this business in a box that connects the dots? All in one place, you have access to these tools, access to partners, access to resources that can help navigate and guide you through the process. And what we're going to run through is actually these parts of the process. And we're going to go in chronological order. But to start, we're going to run through everything that one typically needs to actually get a business off the ground from LATAM. And what we built is a platform to enable this. But let's actually go through each of these bullet points. So starting with company formation, getting an EIN and a bank account, setting up your payment stack, getting a registered agent plus an address, and then what you need to do for state filings, IRS tax filings, as well as ongoing support. The very first thing is there's a 4-step process when it comes to setting up your initial company. And I'll actually make the screen a little bigger here so folks can see. In terms of the process, what has to happen is a few things. Step 1 is actually forming your company with the state. And we're going to get into what is the best state to form in. And I'm actually going to ask Jaime, once we get to this, how he decided Delaware and what folks have heard in terms of state recommendations. But step 1 is you have to actually form the company. To form the company, you need to provide your company name, a personal address, which can be anywhere in the world, an email, and then that's submitted to the state. And the state will then submit what's called an articles of organization to form your company, which is then returned to you. This can take a few business days. It depends on the state. It's a government process. But once the document is returned from the state, the next step is to apply for your employer identification number. Think of this as your business's social security number. The same way an individual in the US has a social security number, which designates or marks who they are, the EIN is that identification number the US government uses to associate or mark or identify your business. This form has to be faxed to the IRS. Now, I know that might sound mind-boggling, that yes, we're in the year 2023. We don't have flying cars yet, or maybe we do, but we have electronic cars. We're on the way to Mars, but we still have to fax forms to the IRS to get this EIN. That is the truth. If you have a social, you can apply online, but that's a misconception I'd like to clear up now is if you live in Latin America and you do not have a social security number, you can still get an employer identification number for your business. There's a form that has to be filled out and faxed to the IRS. That can take, unfortunately, up to 8 to 11 weeks. We've seen timelines come down there, closer to 2 to 6 weeks now. And the reason for that is it is a paper manual process. It is forms that are faxed to the IRS and then sent back. Once that does come back, the next step is setting up your business bank account. Again, as I said earlier, you can indeed open a US business bank account from outside the US, from Latin America. What's required, though, is you need a company and you need an EIN. You cannot skip these first two steps. They're actually required in order to open a business bank account. And we'll run through a few of the options there in terms of what banks you can use. And the final step will actually be setting up a payment processor using a tool like Stripe so that you can accept payments in dollars via credit or debit from anywhere in the world. With that process, we're actually going to dive into some of the details now. I think the first thing we want to run through is this question of, should I form an LLC or a C Corp? And I think what I want to do here is, let's actually come back to Jaime. Jaime, I think you mentioned that you originally had formed a C Corp, but maybe that wasn't the best choice, or maybe it was. Could you walk folks through, when you were going through the journey, how you actually decided between an LLC and C Corp, and if you made the right decision there?
Sure. So when I incorporated the C Corp, I mean, I went through to that decision mostly because that's what you would hear a lot of startups do, because you're gonna be selling shares of your company, so you need to have a C Corp and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, that was not my business. My business was not to build a startup that eventually I was going to sell shares. What I needed, it was just a company in the US so I can start selling or using Stripe as a way to sell. So at the end of the day, what I needed was just a pass-through entity, not a C Corp. And it just makes maybe accounting a little bit more complicated. You need to maybe file some more forms than an LLC. LLC is way more simple. And another thing is that it's easier to go from LLC to C Corp, but not the other way around. So those two things I would have loved to know at the beginning.
Well, I think you pretty much just took the presentation over there. That's exactly. So what Jaime ran through there is a couple things. One, absolutely. Most people, when they hear of starting a business, you hear about C Corps, you hear about Facebook, you hear about Netflix, whatever it is, these public companies who oftentimes are C Corps, and they've issued shares, they've IPO'd. But oftentimes an LLC is actually a much simpler and more flexible choice to achieve the end goal. And that's what the goal is. The goal is to figure out what is your end goal and then work backwards from there. And just like you said, LLCs are actually more flexible, simpler to set up, and easier to maintain. However, a Delaware C Corp is actually required if you are raising US venture capital. And I think that is the way, if you're listening out here, you're sitting in LATAM thinking, should I form an LLC or a C Corp? If your main goal is, hey, I'd like to set up a business for liability protection, a business bank account, and Stripe for payments to collect in dollars. So collect payments in dollars, have a business bank account, send funds back. Oftentimes, I would say 9 out of 10, maybe 99 out of 100 or 999 times out of 1,000, the LLC is going to be the better choice. But if you are raising venture capital and it's required by an investor, which it often is in the US, you'll need the Delaware C Corp. And that's because that the C Corp structure is preferable for investors, and it allows you to more easily issue stock, issue shares, which is key for a Delaware C Corp and as you're hiring employees, etc.
Hey, Arjun, can I ask you a question now that
Please,
we have
please.
both there? So imagine I'm a startup and I'm raising capital, but I also want to sell in the US. Should I do it from the same C Corp? Should I have an LLC attached to a C Corp? Does that thing work?
It is. So the question here is, let's say you are looking to raise venture capital and you are looking to expand to the US. What you can do is simply start with a Delaware C Corp and run everything through that. So for example, Doula is a Delaware C Corp. We're a fresh Delaware C Corp. We have registered to do business in a few states because I'm based in New York. So we've done what's called a foreign qualification, which means you register Doula, which is a Delaware incorporated company, to do business in New York. We actually did that in California too, because I used to live in California. So if you're physically located there, you have to. But you do not need to then form an LLC and make that a subsidiary. However, there are sometimes cases where, let's say you are opening up a new business line within your company and you'd like to completely separate that business to protect it from the main entity, then it can make sense to open up an LLC. Now, for folks listening, I would say that most often you won't have to do that originally. Typically, you're going to start with a fresh business and that is the business. But let's say, and I'll give an example. Let's say you start a business selling t-shirts, and eventually you're like, I want to go build the factories that make these t-shirts. And it's going to be a very capital intensive business. You're buying property, you're buying land, maybe some riskier agreements. Maybe in that case, you'd like to have a separate entity to hold that risk or to separate it versus it being the main company. But yeah, to answer the question there, typically the way I would think about it again, and you can see here, is LLCs, you don't need a board of directors. There's no board meetings, no records. It's a pass-through entity. There's no double taxation. With a C Corp, there's a corporate tax, and then there's a tax an individual must pay on revenue and profits that come through. With the LLC, you still get that liability protection. You have the tax flexibility too. You could elect to have it taxed as an S Corp if you live in the US. You could do a C Corp election. And given that, the LLC is oftentimes going to be the more flexible, simpler choice to effectively get you to that end goal. But if you're raising venture, the C Corp is going to be the way to go. And I think one other thing I really want to stress, which I'm really glad Jaime said, it is much easier to go from LLC to C Corp than the other way around. However, if you did start with a C Corp and you're listening to this saying, oh no, you can reverse things. But what I would say here is, even if you're not sure, let's say you think you might want to raise venture in the future, but you're not sure, starting with an LLC is easier than flipping to the C Corp than starting with the C Corp and going down that wrong path specifically there.
And Arjun, I have a question for you.
Yes.
So I'm definitely not going with a C Corp because I know I don't want to raise venture. But I do know I want to have more than one business. I actually do right now, right? I have a marketing agency with one name, one brand. And then I'm starting a new, let's call it an e-learning community company with another brand. And you hear a lot these days about these holdcos, right? These people who want to start a bunch of businesses, different types of businesses under the same roof. What would be my best option there? Should I just run it through one LLC? Should I create one LLC for each company? And again, envisioning a future where there's even more businesses, let's say 4 or 5 businesses. What's my best play there?
That's a great question. And I think, spoken like a true or a serial entrepreneur here, once you catch the bug with one business, you start thinking of another. I think both Jaime and Diego have worked on several things here. The question here is, let's say you start with one business, but you're thinking about doing multiple. Should you do it all under one LLC for multiple LLCs, have a parent LLC with sub LLCs? The answer is it depends, but I'll actually continue to give an answer here. Typically when starting, it makes the most sense to do it through one LLC. However, if you are then starting a materially different business, then I would recommend actually setting up a fresh LLC. And I think a way to think about this is, I'll use the t-shirt example again. Let's say you're based in Latin America and you want to start selling merchandise or clothing in the US. You would start up an LLC. If you then decide, hey, the clothes are selling like wildfire, the polos, they're amazing, people love them. I now want to sell black pants as well. Pants and t-shirts, I think, are similar enough where, hey, it probably doesn't make sense to set up a separate LLC with a separate bank account just for that. But if you're then deciding, hey, I want to get now into a digital course. I want to educate people on how to set up this store specifically and how to sell e-commerce. Maybe you actually want to keep things completely separate there. You want separate banking, your profit and loss in one place. And in that case, it might make sense to actually set up a separate entity there for that. Now, the third step would be, okay, let's say you have multiple companies. What you can do, and this is the cool part about owning LLCs, is you can set up a subsidiary structure. So I think something that Diego mentioned was, hey, having a holdco. That is a holding company. And what you would do there with an LLC is you can actually have an LLC be the owner of another LLC. So in this case, what can happen is you start with that t-shirt company. Cool, I'm going to do courses. Hey, maybe there's another company I'd like to do. And you can actually have one parent LLC that's the owner of all of these LLCs. The other good thing here about LLCs, and this comes back to the flexibility you can see on the left, is that changing the ownership of an LLC is actually very flexible. And what I mean by very flexible is an LLC will come with something called an operating agreement. Think of that as the bylaws that determine the structure of the LLC. And actually, the way to change that, there's no board meeting. You don't have to send documents to the state like you would with a C Corp. You can actually amend that document internally and update it with the members. And if you're a sole owner, you can just decide to do that on your own. So in this case, Diego's example of, hey, multiple businesses, holding company, having that structure, what I would say is go step by step. Like anything in life, I wouldn't go out and form 10 LLCs and have them sitting there and say, okay, I'm ready to go with these 10. Start with the first business. Hey, when the second business comes around, you can form that one fresh. And then you could set up the proper holdco structure or the subsidiary structure to manage those businesses. Jaime or Diego, I'm curious if you've seen this either from personal experience or other businesses too that have set up maybe a holdco structure or have had multiple entities.
Well, I can tell you, at least in the case of startups, it's a very common practice nowadays that you would have your holding company based out of Delaware, and they are the owners of the companies operating locally in each of the Latin American countries. So why someone would do that is because investors around the world are familiar with the Delaware structure, so they're comfortable investing in a legal entity they understand. While it's not the same as investing, you're a US investor, European investor, investing in a Peruvian, Bolivian, Argentinian, they don't know the legal structures. They want to protect themselves also. So it's easier for them to just invest in the holding company based out of Delaware. And then Delaware is the owner of the subsidiaries that are legal entities in each of the countries. So that's at least what is very common to see. And I would even go one step further and say that there's one practice that's becoming more recommended now, is to have even a structure on top of the Delaware company, which is having it on BVI or Cayman, just for a tax thing for non-US citizens. But that's something we can talk another time.
That might be a full separate webinar, but it's totally true. There are other entities. You can set up a Cayman entity, a BVI. There's other structures that you could do there. But actually, I think this is a fantastic segue. So what Jaime mentioned is the confidence folks have in a Delaware LLC, the prestige it might hold, and why people oftentimes form there. Typically, the most common question that comes up now is, okay, you've determined LLC versus C Corp, but should you form in, what state should you form in? And we've actually quizzed thousands of entrepreneurs on this question. Over 90% of people, and I won't give the answer, but maybe you can see from here. When we ask people, hey, what's the most popular state to form in? What's the best state to form in? 90% of people will say Delaware. That's actually incorrect. And I'll actually break down what the best state to form an LLC it is. First of all, why do most people say Delaware? It's exactly like we heard from Jaime. It's exactly, I think we've all realized this too. You hear about Delaware because that's where most Fortune 500 companies are formed, in Delaware. Delaware is the most popular state in the US for entity formation. Delaware is not the first state where the LLC was formed, though. The first LLC was formed in Wyoming. Not many people know that. But the reason why Delaware has so much prestige is that it is a very popular state. Delaware C Corps are the gold standard for raising venture capital. And because of that, many people think I should form in Delaware. However, when it comes to figuring out what the best state to form in, here's the way I would think about it. There's two trees here. If you live inside the United States, the best state to form your company in is not Delaware. It's actually the state that you live in. And the reason for that is because you are doing business in that state. What does doing business mean? To make it simpler, think, where am I physically located? I'm physically located in New York. Let's say I was starting a t-shirt company. Because I live in New York, I'm physically based here. Technically, when I'm on my computer writing emails or I'm on the phone, I'm doing business there. And because of that, I technically have to report that I'm doing business in the state and register my business to do business there. Let's say I had then gone and formed at first a Delaware LLC. I then pay the fees to file in Delaware. I pay for a registered agent, and I have to pay my annual fees. But I then have to come back to New York and actually register to do business there. What does that mean? I have to pay for a registered agent and I have to pay the annual fees. So if you're doing the math there, you realize I don't have to pay fees in 2 states for one business. I haven't even expanded to Delaware yet. I don't have a physical presence there. So that's a big mistake folks inside the US make. They think I should just go form in Delaware. Or I read this article that said Texas might be good, but they're physically located in another state. And what ends up happening is they pay multiple fees. That's the US.
What about taxes?
Yes. So let me cover non-US, then I'll cover taxes too. If you live outside the US, The good news is the best state to form it, you can choose any state in the US. Very interesting. I didn't realize this at first, but if you live outside the US, any state in the US, you can choose to form an LLC in. Naturally, you're then thinking, okay, what's the best state to form it? Typically, we've seen, and we've worked with thousands of entrepreneurs from all over the world, but we'll actually answer this from a LATAM perspective too. The two most popular states we see are Wyoming and Delaware. And it's for two reasons. One, as Jaime said, and as we've seen too, Delaware does hold prestige. People are comfortable with Delaware. If you say you have a Delaware LLC or a Delaware company, that adds immediate weight, and people understand, okay, it's a legitimate US company. However, Wyoming is one of the most popular states in the US for non-US residents, especially in LATAM. And it's that for a few reasons. One, very friendly legislation. Wyoming legislation is very proactive. They push the boundaries in terms of trying to make the state as friendly for businesses, especially e-commerce or digital businesses. Two, there's low tax rates as well. So this is actually whether you're inside the US or outside the US, but Wyoming offers a very low tax rate, no income or franchise tax charges as well. The final piece though, and this is usually the kicker, is in Wyoming, there's only an annual report fee to the state of $60. In Delaware, it's $300. This is a state fee. This goes to the state. Think of it as the tax, if you will, for having your business formed in the state that the state collects. So if you're zooming out here, if you are an online digital business, which most businesses are, you actually save $240 per year forming in Wyoming. And don't sleep on Wyoming. People call Wyoming the Swiss Alps of the Rockies. It's where the first LLC was ever invented and created. It's the most popular state we actually see for non-US residents. But at the end of the day, you know your customers better than anyone. If the prestige of having a Delaware LLC matters, $240 is worth the price. And again, it's your company, you know your customers best. And the final piece I'll add here before pausing for questions is in terms of taxes, and we'll get into this more. If you are an online digital business, meaning no physical presence in the US, you then would pay taxes in the country you are based in. So you do have to pay this annual state fee, and there is a report that must be filed to the IRS. It's an informational filing, but you're not paying income tax in the US. You're not paying a state tax here. You are then just paying your tax in the country where you're recognizing profit, which you pass back to your country. But let me pause there. Jaime, Diego, I'm curious if you guys have any questions or any color you'd like to add to this too.
I just wanted to add about Wyoming, because it's also something that it's quite new for me. And it was very interesting to see that they're also very crypto friendly. So if you're starting a crypto company, I've heard most people are going the Wyoming road.
Second to that, yes, Wyoming is very crypto friendly, very blockchain friendly. They were actually one of the first states in the US to enable legislation that allowed DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, to register as an LLC. So that's a great example. I think if you're a crypto company, Wyoming is oftentimes the most popular. If you're a non-US e-commerce or digital company, Wyoming's still very popular. And then Delaware is still the gold standard, if you will. The prestige, it can't be replaced. And if that matters for your business, then again, your customers, you know best. The $240 extra, I think, is worth it in terms of having that credibility that can give to your customers.
Cool. I don't know if I'm getting myself ahead of myself here, and maybe you'll touch on it later. But I just want to double click on what you mentioned about that. Let's call it double taxation or being taxed when you don't live in the States, right? Because that was my main concern when evaluating if I even want to form a company in the United States. It would obviously be an LLC for me. I wouldn't be living in the States. I would mainly be living in LATAM, maybe Europe. So what problems or things have you seen when it comes to paying taxes when someone doesn't live in the States, and maybe some common errors?
And I'll just add two more things for complexity, Arjun. One is, what if you're selling to US citizens? You're from Peru and you're selling something digital, and someone from the US is buying it. And then there's also federal and state taxes. So, how does that work?
These are all great questions. What I'm going to do is actually jump ahead to a different slide, and which covers a bunch of these things. And if you give me 1 second, I'm actually going to fly through towards the end here. Okay. And what I have here is an overview of what a company timeline looks like for a US company. And you'll see its company timeline with Doula Total Compliance. Doula has a plan that actually covers full compliance, state filings, tax filings, registered agent, but it actually shows the timeline here. Step one is you form the company. And let's say, as we've gone through this decision here, you're a crypto company, let's go Wyoming, digital e-commerce, you're going Wyoming, or maybe you decide Delaware. You form your company, you get your tax number from the IRS, get your bank account set up and a payment processor set up. If we skip to the bottom here, you're going to get a registered agent right away. A registered agent, think of them as a liaison between the state, the IRS, and your company. It's required in every state, physically based there. Think of it as an office where mail is sent, scanned, and then uploaded to your digital account where you can view it. That goes on in perpetuity. Now, the two key tax filings, if you will, that have to happen, the first is with the state. So if you come here to the right, you'll see this annual state report. That is that $60 fee in Wyoming, which goes to the state of Wyoming. And in Delaware, it's called the $300 annual franchise fee. Those fees go directly to the state. Flat 60 in Wyoming, flat 300 in Delaware, that goes each year. Now, the more complex question, which we can attack head on, is what about the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, or the federal tax return? To answer this question, here's the way I would break it down. The way that taxes are determined is, where are you physically based? And do you have a physical presence in the US? So I think that's the key thing, physical. And I'll run through what that means specifically. Are you physically located in the US? And if the answer is yes to any of these questions, there's a very good chance, as in you should think, you are going to pay taxes in the in the US to the IRS. Are you physically based in the US? So do you live there? If you do, okay, US tax obligation. Do you have physical employees based in the US? Are you hiring someone who's physically there? Under your company, are you physically paying them? Are they there? If so, physical presence. Do you personally have a physical office there? Not some third-party warehouse, maybe not some supplier you're using, but do you personally have a physical space there? Again, think physical. If the answer is no to none of those, and you are based outside the US, and you have a digital business, even if you're selling into the US, then technically, and the key term here, this is the term the US uses, it's called you don't have effectively connected income, meaning no physical presence, so that you're transacting, you're selling, but you are physically based outside the US. So you would then pay taxes when you collect that money, you repatriate it to your country, and then when you take profit or you're taking revenue from there, whatever taxes you pay in your own country, whatever the tax rate is, that's what you would pay. Now, one other thing I'd like to add here. In the US, a question that comes up is what about sales tax? The US, each state has a different threshold. They call it a nexus in terms of how much sales tax you actually need to, how much in sales you actually need to be doing in order to actually collect sales tax. And the reason why the states do this is because if someone's just starting a business, it's not really worth the state's while to go hunt someone down for a couple percentage points. But in certain states, and we have a full guide on this, which goes through the thresholds. For reference, it's several hundred thousands of dollars. If not in some states, it's millions in that one state where you have to start collecting sales tax. Once you pass that threshold, then the state would actually collect sales tax. The good news is, though, if you use a tool like Stripe, Stripe actually has sales tax collection built in. They acquired this company called TaxJar. So that's a major reason why I strongly recommend Stripe. It simplifies that piece of the equation for you. It'll take care of that sales tax. So just to recap one more time here, because this can be pretty confusing. There's three types of taxes. There's a state tax, which is that annual report filing, 300 in Delaware, 60 in Wyoming. That happens every year. There's the federal tax. If you're not physically located there, no physical warehouse, no physical employees, you're going to pay taxes in the country that you live in if you have that digital business without effectively connected income. And for sales tax, if you pass that nexus or that threshold, above that point, you'll then have to report and pay sales tax. But the good news is you don't have to worry about that if you use a tool like Stripe. It'll take care of that for you specifically. So I'll pause there. I know this is a quite meaty topic. And another thing I will float is that at Doula specifically, we have CPAs, certified professional accountants, on our team. So if you still don't feel 100% confident or comfortable with your situation, you can schedule a consultation with us. We have specific guides on this as well. But I think this is quite shocking, and I think quite cool. I think personally when I learned this, where again, if you have this digital business based outside the US, You can sell to the US and you don't pay an effective tax in the US. You're just paying taxes in the country that you live in personally.
Cool. I have a question that doesn't apply to me, but maybe someone in the future will have it.
Yeah.
Does freelancers who work from the US count as employees? I assume not, right?
In this case specifically, just to understand, they're freelancing for your business specifically.
Yes, but they live in the States, right? Because you said one of those 3 points to consider, if there's a connection with you from the United States, if you have employees in the States. I'm just asking, if you hire freelancers, are those considered employees or not?
The question, actually, this is a great question. It depends on how they are hired. So freelancer, sometimes that's used interchangeably with either a contractor or a consultant versus a full-time W-2 employee, if you will. Are they employed through your US entity? That difference does matter. And what I would do here, and actually I think this is just a great question, which we can follow up personally on after, or we can do a separate blog post or article on this, but really distinguishing between, is this someone just contracting? If you're an international contractor, for example, you can hire folks like that from anywhere in the world, and that person is actually responsible for filing their own taxes, not the business. They would be paid effectively, and then they would have to handle taxes. Versus if they're a full-time W-2 employee, then the company actually has to withhold taxes specifically. So in this case specifically, if it is a freelancer or part-time consultant or contract, I believe that is okay. But again, if they are a full-time employee hired through the company, that would be different.
Awesome. There's also other aspects that you mentioned, just like the CPA that, you can get advice, but you might even need, or I bet you need an accountant to help you out in your business, maybe a lawyer. Like, how much would I have to expect to spend, or what type of services I'm going to need after I've already incorporated?
Amazing question here. And I think what I'm going to do is skip back to a couple of slides here so folks can understand a little bit about what you can expect. And this is what we've tried to build at Doula as well. On the top here is typically what happens. You'll form a company and you've gotten set up. Amazing. You've gotten your bank account. Fantastic. But there's a few key pieces which you've run through, which you have to take care of. You need this registered agent, which is required in all 50 states. You then need to do a state filing. And you need to do an IRS tax filing too. It's an informational report. You might also need consultations. Hey, maybe you have a question with a lawyer, you need a contract done specifically, or you have a question on just taxes and making sure, hey, does this freelancer count as someone full-time? Is this going to open you up to any tax liability or questions? Those costs can run up. And the reason why these costs can run up is if you do these things a la carte, each business on their own has their margins. Typically, lawyers or CPAs will charge by the hour as well. What we tried to build was this total compliance package, which actually handles the registered agent, the state filings, and the IRS tax filings all in one go. And we also do have CPAs in-house. What I'll say here is this. At the end of the day, our goal is to educate people on what's required. Whether it's Doula, whether you use some other company, that's completely okay, actually. It's your business, your choice. But what we want to make sure is that people aren't unaware of these ongoing requirements as well. So in terms of how much you can expect, look, with all of these things, you could take the DIY approach, DIY being do it yourself. And it is possible, again, do the state filings, do the IRS tax filings, handle your book specifically. But this is where, as an entrepreneur, I do believe that one of the most important assets is your time. And especially a founder's time is more valuable than anything else specifically. So with that in mind, the package that we put together, and I'll just skip back a couple of slides here, is we do an initial formation at Doula for $297 plus state fees. And that includes that full starter package, the formation, the address, the EIN, bank account setup, the registered agent. Our total compliance package, which includes bookkeeping support, self-serve tools for that, state filings, IRS filings, the registered agent, tax consultations, that runs in for just over $2,000, so $2,397. The other thing too, because I know for a lot of folks just starting a business, you're short on cash. A lot of folks just start with a starter plan. And then when tax season comes around, they make a decision on, hey, do I want to actually get professional help with these filings, or do I want to do them on my own? Now, obviously, there's a lot of different companies out there, CPAs. I would expect if you're looking to either bundle these together a la carte using yourself or a mix of third-party partners, your total costs are going to range somewhere in the hundreds to higher hundreds, maybe lower thousands. And that's if you're using another partner. If you truly wanted to do everything DIY, you would just pay state fees. But again, it comes back to, as a founder, what can you focus on that you can do best, and what can you outsource to someone who can take care of, who's done it thousands of times for other companies and customers too. So again, the goal here, and I want to stress this again, if you're based in LATAM, if you're based wherever listening to this, don't feel like you have to get everything all in one go. You can simply start with just forming the company and making sure that's set up properly. But it's very important that you have a plan for the ongoing needs, such as your bookkeeping, the accounting, the IRS filings, and the state filings too.
Great. Sorry, we're moving you around. Let's go back to
No, this is great. I think these are the types of questions which people have. So I think we only have 7 minutes left. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to run through some of the last like hard-hitting questions or the most common questions that we do get. And then I do want to jump in. I know there's been folks who've been here the entire time. And again, I do want to give folks a chance. I know there's a lot of folks listening here who are looking to set up a business. So we are going to be giving away an LLC to someone. So I'll mention exactly how you can do that at the end. But a couple final things I do just want to run through here. The first thing is, and let me actually run through here. A major question folks have is, can I open a bank account? And something that we've built at Doula, and there's obviously other options here, is a banking solution for folks. Now, specifically, the first thing is that you can indeed open a bank account if you're not based inside the United States. However, you will see that there are certain countries where there are restrictions. So you can read this list here. We have this published online. The reason for this list of restrictions is that these are actually determined at a federal level. The US government might have certain sanctions, or there might be certain restrictions on being able to bank customers from certain countries who are residents. If that is the case, unfortunately, even though you might be able to set up an LLC, you will not be able to set up a bank account. And I think that's critical. So if you're out there listening, you can check this list now. You can always check online, but make sure you double check there. We try to be proactive in letting customers know, hey, this is the restricted list, because you don't want to go through the process of starting the company, getting the EIN, and then realizing, oh no, my country is not on the supported list. That's one thing I just wanted to highlight there. The second thing is that something we try to do is we know that there's more to starting a business than actually starting the business. The truth is, and I'll say this as someone working on a business to help people start businesses, you actually do not need to form the company to start the business. You can start talking to customers today. You can start wireframing a website today. You could record the first episode of your podcast today without actually having an actual entity. There's so much you can do before you actually even begin. But the truth is, for everything else you might need, there's a lot. You might need Amazon web server credits to spin up your website. Maybe you're a software as a subscription business and you need ChartMogul to track your analytics. Maybe you're looking to set up a referral program and you want to give an affiliate discount. You could use a tool like Rewardful. Or maybe you're looking for a high quality first generation or third generation, whatever you like to call it, email tool like Superhuman. So something that we try to do at Doula is have this extensive partner network of tools and resources that you can get discounts on to truly fulfill all the needs of your business going forward as well. Last thing I will touch on here, and then I do want to get into last few minutes, is I think the most important thing here is making sure that customers feel like they have a solution or partner they can trust. And one thing that we try to take great attention to at Doula is helping customers from around the world. I know there's a lot of folks listening in from Latin America today, but you can see here at Doula, we've worked with founders on over 175 countries. Enzo is a founder from France who actually got into Y Combinator. Mazir is a founder from India. Ksenia is a founder from the United Kingdom, and Alex is a founder from Ukraine. And all of these founders have different types of businesses. Alex is actually a YouTube influencer. Ksenia is working on a real estate business. Mazir is working on a tech solution, and Enzo is working on a software as a services business. But the truth is, you might be thinking out there, oh, is my business the right type of business? We can support all of them. Really, the more important thing is that you get things set up properly. And it's been awesome for us to see just the energy from founders around the world, but most importantly, the love we've gotten from founders as we've been able to help them go through this process. I think that's the most important thing, where if you have any doubt or any questions, we have free consultations. Our team is available around the clock, quite literally, we have team members all around the world where you can live chat us online. You can schedule a consultation. That's completely free because we know this is a stressful process. As Jaime was, really, really, really grateful for him sharing about even mistakes personally that were made and things that he wished he had done differently. We made mistakes too when we were forming our first business. So if you're thinking, I'm not ready for this, I don't know this, trust me, you're not alone. Even people who've gone through and done this before have made mistakes. And it's part of the process. But I think it's really awesome to have Diego and Jaime here to share their stories and to learn, hey, these are the things that we did. These are the questions we have. And it's encouraging and I think awesome to hear that even founders who've done multiple businesses, there's still things that we want to check on and be careful about. So with all that, what we're really excited to do is, again, we want to be a resource for folks now or in the future for anyone who really has that dream idea and does want to turn it into their dream business. So there's a few things here. If you go to our website, you can live chat us. There's a little bubble on the bottom where anyone can actually ask us a question and we're happy to answer. Again, these are completely free. There's no charge for that. The second thing is we wanted to make this a little fun. So for anyone who did register through the event page, you're going to actually enter the running automatically to get a free LLC. And if you're listening now, you can actually scan this QR code too. That'll take you to the event page. So whip out your phone. I'll keep this up here. By the way, this doesn't expire. So let's say you're sitting out there and you're like, hey, I don't know when my dream business is ready to start. You can use this in the future as well. But our goal here is, again, reducing as much friction as possible and helping you take that dream idea and turn it into your dream business from Latin America, or again, if there's folks listening from other locations, doing it from another place in the world. And the final thing I'll say is there were some awesome questions even on this webinar. There's probably other questions that we got, and we're going to go check them out on social, specifically on the platforms. But we're more than happy to do additional events like this. Also, I know I personally have more questions for Jaime and for Diego on their businesses, so maybe we'll need to do deep dives with them as well. But there truly is a wealth of learnings from their experiences too. So I'm really grateful you two were able to share some of your anecdotes and your stories at the beginning as well. But with that, I also want to thank Jaime and Diego for coming on, and maybe we can just do a couple parting messages. So Diego, Jaime, I'll ask each of you one question, and then also if you can share where people can contact you. It's August, which is bananas because it feels like it was just January yesterday. But in the last 5 months of the year, what is one thing you're excited about? And then how can people contact you? Jaime, do you want to start?
Sure. So I have to say something I'm excited about that is coming soon, or?
Yes, anything in the rest of the year that you're looking forward to.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm really into what's AI gonna bring us anytime soon. ChatGPT 3.5 was amazing, then 4 came, 5 is on the making. So if it's something that was launched, if I'm not mistaken, in February and is already matured a lot in this month, man, how's this gonna end? So I use a lot of AI on my daily basis. So I'm looking forward on the tools that are going to be available in the following 5-6 months. And where can people reach out to me? I'm in LinkedIn and Instagram. You can look for me as Jaime Sotomayor, or also I invite you to follow my podcast, Innovación Sin Barreras.
Amazing. Yes, AI is going to be fun to watch, and we'll also be sharing out the links too for Jaime's profile and some of those links as well. Diego, the question is, what's something in the last 5 months of the year you're personally looking forward to? And then where can people find you online too?
Awesome. I'm looking forward to, well, first of all, starting my LLC in Wyoming through Dula.
Love it.
Getting your guys' help. That's a must. I'm definitely going through that process with you guys. It's been awesome to meet you, Arjun. And I'm basically, again, like Jaime, always learning, always seeing what's coming up with AI, with Web3. I'm a fan of what's happening also with XR, VR, and AR. And it's a long ways ahead, but I'm getting up to date with everything. And helping people learn, especially here in LATAM, all the people who speak Spanish, trying to translate all that information I learned through YouTube and Twitter and webinars like this one. So I'm excited to start my new company, which is basically around the idea of helping people learn more and keeping up to date with La Era Digital, which is where they can find me. Era Digital on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok.
Love it. All right. Well, hey, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be sending out an email after with the links to follow these amazing folks and resources. Again, there'll be a link to this recording that you can watch in the future. And again, don't hesitate with any questions. This will be available to watch in the future, but whether it's now, whether it's in 1 year, whether it's in 5 years, remember, it is never too late to take your dream idea and turn it into your dream business. Oftentimes, the hardest thing is just getting started. So rooting for anyone out there who's going after it, kudos to you. Don't listen to the critics. Go after what your dreams are and go for it. And hope to see everyone at a future event as well.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much. Awesome.